Hi there everyone, and welcome to another Max Business Workshop. Hope everybody is fantastic. If you've completed the program, that you're enjoying massive success and applying all of the learning that you've received over time, and if you're still completing the program, that you're getting close, enjoying the experience, and you're taking full advantage of the mentoring that's available to you from Kerry, Roy and myself. Today's business workshop I chose because I've had a number of questions come through and discussions with students in recent times about business names, about trademarks, about brands, and I thought, well, that's a sign that maybe I should put together a workshop and make that the focus for this month. So here we go. And as you can see on the screen in front of you, if you are watching the workshop rather than listening to it, it's headed Business Names and Trademarks Made Easy. And then that question being pondered, what's in a name? Well, obviously, when you're contemplating starting a new business, the name can be a very important decision for you to make. The name of the business is often the brand that you have chosen and you've developed to be the window for your product, for your service, for your studio, for your gym, whatever the case may be. And it's almost certainly a name or a phrase that you're particularly passionate about, and you believe that it will allow you to connect with your target market and reach out to them and secure lots and lots of clients to make you successful. And when that's the case, you naturally want to try and protect that name, because when you make it hugely successful, not only is the underlying business itself, the customers, the systems, and everything that goes with that, making that business successful, sometimes the name in itself can be incredibly valuable. And while let's talk about some iconic brands like McDonald's, albeit we might hate what they produce and what they do to people's health and well-being, but at the end of the day, that name is incredibly valuable, as well as the underlying businesses, by and large, being enormously successful as well. So the business name that you select can often be very, very important. It doesn't have to be connected to your business necessarily, or the name of your business, but often that is the case. So it's an important thing to understand, and it's an important thing, and I'll try and step you through it as best I can in today's workshop. So the starting point is just some general things about business names. And firstly, given that most of our students are located in either Australia or New Zealand, obviously some are located elsewhere around the world, and the same will apply in most of those locations. There's a significant difference between what the legislation or the process that applies in Australia and in New Zealand. And that just reflects the fact different country, different laws, and that's common right across the spectrum and pretty much everything to do with business, and there's often similarities, but there's also often fundamental differences. In Australia, for example, they do have a separate register where you are able to register a business name. So let's say, for example, and I'll use this example a little bit today, my business was going to be called Savvy Personal Training. Then in Australia, I would search the register, and if that name was available, I could register that business name, which means I would have ownership over that particular business name. Whereas in New Zealand, we do not have a business register or business name register. And so your ability or the processes in which you can go through to try and purport or seek some degree of ownership or control over the name of a business in New Zealand is a little bit different to what it is in Australia. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. It just means it's different, and so that's an important thing to understand. Now, also I'd like to just reiterate how important it is to understand that a business name, whether it's a registered business name in the case of Australia or not, or a business name that you develop and you start to use, is not the same thing as a company name if you register a company in either Australia or New Zealand. In the case of Australia, you can register the business name, but you also can or have to register the company if that's your chosen way of running your business. And it's also different to a domain name. So what I'm talking about when I say a domain name, it might be several www.savvypersonaltraining.com.au or www.savvypersonaltraining.co.nz. Now, you can own or register ownership of a domain name, providing that domain name has not already been taken. And that's pretty much the case globally throughout the entire world. Now, recognising that different countries, for example, New Zealand.co.nz, and now more recently just .nz or .com, or in the case of Australia, you can have .com, or in Australia you can have .com.au, and they become separate domain names. So you could have, for example, a situation where the first name is ABC. .com, but also that's completely separate to abc.com.au. A little bit more complicated, but just to understand that there are different domain names that you can register. But effectively within a business, depending on whether you're in Australia or New Zealand, you have the ability to try and take some degree of control and ownership over the name that you have developed for your business, the brand that you've developed for the business, by using either the business name register in Australia, the company name, and or the domain name. Okay, and that collectively, those things can give you control and comfort that no one else can use that name to try and be successful in the same space that you're being successful, the same industry that you're being successful in. Okay, so let's have a little just specifically as it relates to Australia. I mean, obviously, the first thing, whether you're in Australia or New Zealand, is decide on the name you want, the name that you've developed for your business, your brand. And be very clear on that, because it's an important, it's an important decision, and it's one that you've got to get excited about, and you've got to be confident that it connects with your target market and allow you to attract clients. Then you can go and search the business name register. And for those of you looking at the PowerPoints, I have put that address in there for you. But if not, it's essentially you can search that through the ASIC, ASIC, Australian Securities and Investment Commission website, and if you went into the main website and search business name register, you'd find it. But for those of you who are seeing the PowerPoints, you'd be able to see the full detailed address, and if you go there, it'll allow you to search the name of the register. In the case that I gave before, Savvy Personal Training, you'd be able to put that in there and see if that name was available. And if it was available, then it would allow you to start the process to take ownership for that business name in the register. And there's a process you have to go through, and there is some cost, minor I might add, but it's a step to go through. You can then also go into and search the domain name register. And there's lots of different domain name providers, but they all share information. So if you go into Google, for example, and you put in search domain name registers, it will come up and give you some options, and then you follow your nose through that, and you would put your name in, savvypersonaltraining.com.au or savvypersonaltraining.co.nz, and it will tell you if it is available, or if it's not available, what other options might be available, what other variations on that might be available. And then if it is available, or one of the other options appeals to you, then you go through a process of registering the domain. Then beyond that, if you want to form a company in order to own your business, let's say in the case of Australia, Savvy Personal Training Pty Limited, or in the case of New Zealand, Savvy Personal Training Limited, you go into the ASIC website, in this case in Australia, and go through the same search process, or if you've got the PowerPoints, you'll be able to see the address there, and you can search the register to see if that company name is actually available. If it is, then you go through it, you can step your way through a process to take ownership of the company name. Now, you can do that in the sense that you reserve the name, and then I would highly advise that you go and talk to your accountant that you're going to take on board to help you run your business and be successful, to help you, to get them to help you to set up the actual structure and ownership of the company. But what you've done is you've reserved the name for a period of time, generally 30 days, which gives you 30 days to complete the exercise with your accountant. Okay. And you know, every single business that starts up, generally speaking, goes through these processes. So they're not complicated. They're pretty straightforward, and the quality of the information and the simplicity of the processes on you know, the websites like the ASICS website in Australia and the company's office websites and the like in New Zealand is pretty good. It's pretty paint by numbers, very simple. Okay. In New Zealand, same again, you need to decide on the name you want. What you need to do is, because there is no business name register in New Zealand, you need to do a little bit of research in your market and location, okay? To find out, to make sure that there's no one else. For example, if my business name is going to be Savvy Personal Training, and I did a little bit of research in my market, e.g. personal training, health and wellness and fitness, and my location, which was, let's say, Auckland, and I found that there was another person running a personal training business in Auckland, I'd be ill-advised to set up and start to potentially run my business as Savvy Personal Training, because it could be suggested that I am trying to copy them, that I'm trying to take advantage of the work and time and effort that they've put into building that brand in the Auckland market, and I'm trying to trade off that and take advantage of that. And the law in New Zealand says you can't do that. Whereas if you search Savvy Personal Training and there's a personal training studio in Invercargill at the other end of the country, then it would be okay for you to set up and start running Savvy Personal Training in Auckland, because clearly you are not competing with someone who is based, you know, nearly 2,000 miles away in the city of Invercargill. And so in that case, you're not trying to take advantage of what they've done in the particular market and in that particular location. And so, you know, that's the process you need to go through. Understand whether there's any other competitors, because it just may be coincidental that someone else has had a great idea just like you have, but they've just beaten you to the draw, so to speak. And in which case you need to rethink how you might change your brand or modify it in such a way that it is different enough not to be seen by an independent person looking at it to say that they are the same thing. Clearly, you want an independent person to look at it and say, I understand that they are different businesses, even though they are operating in the same market, e.g. Auckland. Okay. And what you're trying to do is identify possible conflicts, because you don't want in New Zealand to be in a situation where unwittingly you've come up with a great name, but you've got a competitor who's beaten you to the draw, and they might come back at you and say you can't do that because, you know, you're trying to trade off our success, and that would could cause you a lot of pain and the need to make a lot of change once you've invested the money. You can search the company register, in this case through the company's office in New Zealand, and for those of you seeing the PowerPoint, you can see the links. And if, for example, in the example I gave, Savvy Personal Training in Auckland, someone was operating in, you were going to operate in Auckland, they were operating in Invercargill, but they were operating as a sole trader. If you were to register the company name, Savvy Personal Training Limited, and they didn't also have the domain name, and you registered it and had savvypersonaltraining.co.nz, you now have a much stronger control over that brand name, over Savvy Personal Training in New Zealand, because now not only you own the company name, you own the domain name, your ability, even though you might have started business later than the one in Invercargill, you're in a stronger position to be able to grow and expand your business without there ever being any suggestion that you've taken it trying to take advantage of a business that someone else set up by the same name before you did. Okay. Now, in this, we often talk about your business mastermind group and how it is important to engage with them. They become key people in your business success. And you have your accountant, which helps you with setting up, your structures to get the best tax outcomes and to help you manage your money. But the lawyer helps you with things like formation of the company, the detail around that, and so if you find any of this tricky, then engaging your lawyer to help you step through this would be a really, really good idea. And your lawyer you'll use for other things, like if you were going to sign for example, a contract to be a personal trainer at someone else's studio, or you were contemplating on leasing some premises, or you're buying a house or something like that. You're always going to have a lawyer, and they become a really, really helpful and important part of your business mastermind group, and they'll help you step through this. Okay. So that's dealt with the concept of the business name and how to assert control or ownership for a brand, recognizing there are some differences between Australia and New Zealand. It's a little bit different to trademarks. Trademark is often the way in which something is stylized, or a symbol. And again, because I used the example earlier on of McDonald's, we all know the magic M that signifies the McDonald's brand. Now, they have asserted a trademark, a registered trademark, and that's often denoted where you'll see it referenced or used somewhere. It's an R with a circle around it, which means they have secured rights to that stylized M, or the arches, the golden arches. And you could link to lots and lots of other brands that have different stylized logos. And no one else can ever use that, or use anything that could be considered to be the same or similar, or to confuse people. Now, it's a very complex and expensive process to go through, but if you have built a successful business, and with that built a successful brand or a specific logo or way of representing who you are, that the marketplace connects with and allows you to attract clients to your business, then it's absolutely worth thinking about registering the trademark to get security. But it's also complex too, in the sense that different trademarks apply across different businesses. For example, let's say someone had a logo that sort of looked a little bit like McDonald's, but they were operating a mechanic business doing car repairs in a sleepy suburb somewhere in Auckland or Christchurch. Now, the question that would be asked then is, are they attempting to trade off McDonald's success or off McDonald's name or its logo? Would anybody with an educated person ever think that that particular party was a McDonald's restaurant? And so the argument then becomes probably not, and it's unlikely that McDonald's would be too concerned about it. But big companies with successful brands, they do guard them jealously. But at law, the law would probably look at that and say, look, there's clearly, even acknowledging that McDonald's has a registered trademark in that of the golden arches, that there is similarities in the logo of the mechanic operating in a sleepy suburb in Christchurch or Auckland, but no one would, on any reasonable basis, think or regard them as being linked in any way to the McDonald's brand. And so chances are there'd be no concern for that particular small business. But the big boys, being very protective, have much bigger lawyers can spend a lot of money on protecting their brand, and so it could be that it becomes an expensive and time-consuming and costly experience for you. So my advice is don't risk upsetting someone, and be sure that if you are registering a trademark, or you're going to start a business that might conflict with someone who does have a registered trademark, that you think that through very carefully. You can assert ownership of a symbol, or attempt to assert ownership of a symbol, and not need to register it if you identify it as being, with the letters T and M, as being an unregistered trademark. But you're telling the world that you have a degree of ownership and protection around that because you came up with it first. You've been operating for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. You probably own the domain, you probably own the company name, and so therefore you're trying to, even though you haven't registered the trademark and gone through the full cost of that process, you're giving notice to people that they need to be careful and cautious, because you are, by showing an unregistered trademark, asserting an ownership and control of that name, which is important to you. Okay, but this is an area of law which is complex, it's expensive, and you absolutely have to get advice. And the only time that you really need to think about this is when you're starting to achieve a good degree of success, or you've created something new and different that potentially has so much value that you can see the need to protect it in advance of that success starting to flow through in the terms of financial success and money in the bank. So you're anticipating that success because you've come up with something that truly is quite different and unique, and so you take that step in advance to register the trademark. Okay, but this is one area of business names, intellectual property, brands, that lawyers, unfortunately, while they're an expense in the sense that you have to pay the money, I'd like you to start to think of them as it's an investment. It's an investment in you protecting the value in the things that you've created. So as we've talked about, the registered trademarks, again, there are industry and geographical considerations. Obviously, someone who registers a trademark in New Zealand and is operating something clearly couldn't be regarded to be competing with someone who's got something in Scandinavia somewhere, on the opposite side of the world. And so one final thought for today, other than this is my second to last thought. The best brands never start out with the intent of building a great brand. They focus on building a great and profitable product or service and an organization that can sustain it. Now, when that happens, if you come up with a brand and you focus on building it and growing the business, and happy customers who allow you to build a profitable and successful brand and expand and franchise or open up multiple sites of your own brand, it's that success that prompts the need for you to be sure that through the various mechanisms you've got available, through business names, depending on where you are, company names, domain names, registered trademarks, etc., that you're able to take the steps to provide the protection, to give the protection that you need to ensure that the brand is not stolen away from underneath you. That in itself is difficult. If you've operated a successful brand and you can point to success using that over a period of time, the law internationally pretty much says that if you can, they won't allow people to steal from you your success. It's a common law principle that people can't trade off your success, use your name without your permission. but that's a complex area of law. Having to have that argument with someone because you didn't take the necessary steps to protect what you've got is not a place you want to put yourself. You're better off not putting yourself in a position where you have to have that argument in the first place. So that's a really big picture summary of business names, protecting them, and the processes to go through. My final thought is how important it is for you to, when you're starting to get to this stage, either in your business plan or in the actual steps of starting up your new business, that you take advantage of the mentoring from Kerry and Ryan, myself in this area, talk it through, be sure that you understand it, and also we would reinforce, or I certainly would reinforce in those discussions, how important it is for you to embrace an external accountant, an external lawyer who will become part of your business success into the future. I personally am using the same lawyer and accountant, or the same law firm. My first lawyer is retired, and when he retired, he passed me on to another partner, or younger partner in the firm. But I've been using the same accountant now for sort of 35 years, and they've been an important part of what I've been fortunate enough to do and experience and achieve. So that's my final thought for today. So hopefully that's helpful. Look forward to chatting with you if you'd like some one-on-one guidance and mentoring in this area, and otherwise all the very best for the remainder of 2021, and look forward to chatting again in 2022. Have a great day and see you soon.